The champagne flute clinked against the silverware, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the murmur of 200 guests. I froze. I knew that sound. It was the sound of my sister, Valerie, demanding attention. I was sitting at table 14, tucked away near the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter burst through with a tray of filet mignon, a gust of stale air and dish soap hit me. This was where my family had seated me. The sister of the bride. The one who had written the checks for the flowers, the venue, and even the dress Valerie was wearing. "Come on, Camila," Valerie had said earlier, dragging me by the wrist toward the head table. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin. She had that glint in her eye, the one she'd had since we were kids. The look that meant she was about to break a toy just to see if I would cry. "I want you to meet someone special," she purred. We stopped in front of a distinguished-looking man in a charcoal suit. He had silver hair and eyes that looked like they could appraise the value of a company, or a soul, in seconds. Richard Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises. Valerie's boss. Valerie smoothed her dress, the silk rustling softly. "Mr. Harrington, I am so glad you could make it." She gestured to me with a dismissive wave of her hand, like she was pointing out a stain on the carpet. "And this," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "is my sister, Camila. We usually don't talk about her much. She's the embarrassment of our family." The air left the room. My mother, sitting 2 feet away, let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was an amused one. "Oh Val, don't be so harsh," Mom said, swirling her wine. "Camila tries. Not everyone can be a success story like you, sweetheart. Someone has to be the warning label." My father chuckled, shaking his head. 38 and still playing consultant from her living room. We stopped expecting great things about a decade ago. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, clutching my clutch bag, turned white at the knuckles. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out the invoice for the $12,000 catering bill I had paid yesterday morning because Dad's card had been declined. I wanted to scream that I wasn't just playing consultant, I was a crisis manager for Fortune 500 companies. But I didn't. I stood there, swallowing the humiliation like a jagged stone. I was the fixer. I didn't make scenes, I cleaned them up. Richard Harrington didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He looked from Valerie's smug face to my parents' amused expressions, and finally, his gaze landed on me. He studied me for a long, uncomfortable silence. The tension in the immediate circle grew thick. Then he took a sip of his drink, set it down, and smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who just realized the trap had been sprung. "Interesting," Richard said, his voice low but carrying perfectly over the music. He looked at Valerie. "You call her an embarrassment?" "Well," Valerie giggled nervously, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "It's just a family joke, sir." "Interesting," he repeated. "Because looking at her, and then looking at you. I think you're fired." The glass slipped from my mother's hand. It shattered on the marble floor. Crash. Valerie blinked. Excuse me." "You heard me," Richard said, checking his watch. "Actually, this isn't the place. But since you brought up embarrassment, I think we need to clarify who exactly fits that description. I need to see both of you, Valerie and Camila, at my office. Monday morning. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." He nodded to me, a respectful, almost deferential nod, and walked away, leaving my family in a pile of shattered glass and stunned silence. The rest of the wedding was a blur. Valerie spent the night crying in the bathroom, ruining her makeup. My parents spent the night glaring at me, as if I had been the one to fire her. "What did you say to him?" my father hissed at me in the parking lot as I waited for my Uber. "Did you lie about your sister? Did you sabotage her?" I didn't say a word, Dad, I said, my voice tired. I never say a word. That's the problem. You better fix this, Camila, Mom snapped, wrapping her shawl tighter around herself. If she loses this job, it's on you. She's the one with the real career. You exist. I looked at them. Really looked at them. The way the streetlights cast long shadows over their faces, highlighting the sneers they didn't bother to hide. For years, I had told myself they loved me in their own way. That they were just hard on me because they wanted me to be better. But tonight, standing in the cold, watching them fret over the golden child, who had just publicly humiliated me, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. Like a dead branch finally breaking off a tree in winter. I'll be at the meeting on Monday, I said quietly. But I'm not going there to fix Valerie's mess. Then why are you going? Dad demanded. I opened the car door and looked back at them. To watch. I got in the car and didn't look back. As we drove away, I didn't cry. I was done crying. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I scrolled through the transactions from the last 6 months. The transfers to Mom for medical bills. The tuition payments for Valerie's executive MBA that she never finished. The wedding deposits. Total, $42,000 in 6 months. Embarrassment, I whispered to the empty car. I closed my eyes. Monday was coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was the storm. Sunday passed in a haze of anxiety and memory. I sat in my apartment, a modest, clean space that I owned outright, unlike Valerie's flashy leased condo, and stared at the wall. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. 32 missed calls from Mom. 14 texts from Valerie, ranging from "I'm sorry" to "you ruined everything." I didn't answer. Instead, I let my mind drift back. I needed to understand how we got here. The flashback hit me viscerally, the smell of cheap coffee and the crinkle of receipts. It was 3 months ago. I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, buried under a mountain of wedding brochures. Valerie was on the couch in the next room, watching a reality TV show, laughing loudly at someone else's misfortune. "Camila, did you call the florist?" Valerie yelled without turning her head. "I told you, I want the peonies. The imported ones. Not the local garbage." "I called them, Val," I replied, rubbing my temples. "They want a $900 rush fee because you changed the color scheme for the 4th time. So pay it," she said, popping a grape into her mouth. "I don't have the budget, Val." Mom and Dad said the limit was. Mom walked in, drying her hands on a dish towel. She looked at me with that disappointed sigh I knew so well. "Camila, don't stress your sister out. She's the bride. She needs to be radiant, not worrying about nickels and dimes. Just handle it." "It's not nickels, Mom. It's $900, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And the caterer tried to charge us for a service fee that wasn't in the contract. I spent 3 hours arguing with them yesterday to get it removed." "That's good," Dad chimed in, walking past to get a beer. "You're good at that petty stuff. Haggling. It suits you. Petty stuff." I remembered looking down at the spreadsheet I had built. I had renegotiated the venue contract, saving them $4,200. I had caught the photographer trying to double charge for travel. I was essentially producing a $60,000 wedding for $35,000 through sheer force of will and negotiation skills. And yet, I was the petty one. "I need the deposit for the photographer by tonight, or we lose him," I said, my voice flat. $3,000. "Oh," Mom said, looking at the ceiling. "Well, your father and I are a little tight this month until the pension check clears. Can you float it? We'll pay you back when things settle." Float it. The magic words. I had been floating this family for 15 years. I paid for the dress last week, Mom. That was $2,500. You haven't paid me back for the car repairs in January yet. Valerie sat up on the couch, pausing the TV. She turned to me, her eyes welling up with instant practice tears. See? This is what she does. She holds money over our heads. It's my wedding day, Camila. Why do you have to make everything about you? You're so selfish. I'm not being selfish, I'm being realistic. I argued. Stop it. Dad slammed his beer on the counter. Camila, write the check. Your sister is under enough pressure. You have your little business, you have no kids, no husband, what else are you spending money on? Cats. I didn't have cats. I had a Roth IRA. I had a diversified portfolio. I had a business that generated mid-six figures annually, though I kept that quiet because I knew if they knew the real number, I'd be bled dry. To them, I was just a freelancer scraping by. I remembered the feeling of the pen in my hand. Heavy. The checkbook felt like a lead weight. I wrote the check for $3,000. I tore it out. The sound of the paper tearing was the only sound in the room. Fine, I said. But this is the last time. Sure, Mom said, snatching the check and handing it to Valerie. You're a good sister, Camila. Even if you are a bit difficult. Back in the present, I took a deep breath. A bit difficult. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into my secure work server. There, under a folder marked Project Phoenix, was the file I had been working on for the last 6 weeks. It was a massive restructuring plan for a mid-sized logistics company that was bleeding cash. The client was anonymous, mediated through a law firm. I only knew the company code name. But looking at the header now, seeing the logo on the digital documents, the pieces clicked into place. Harrington Home Furnishings. A subsidiary of Harrington Enterprises. Richard Harrington wasn't just Valerie's boss. He was my client. He just didn't know it was me. Or maybe after last night he did. I thought about the "you're fired" comment. Richard was a man of precision. He didn't make emotional decisions. If he was firing Valerie, it wasn't just because she was rude. He had something on her. And if he had called me to his office, he had something on me too. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. For years, I had been the invisible provider. The ATM. The punching bag. Tomorrow, I was walking into the lion's den. But for the first time, I wasn't walking in as the daughter or the sister. I was walking in as a professional. I packed my briefcase. I put in my portfolio. And then, acting on a gut feeling, I went to the back of my closet and pulled out an old, dusty box marked Grandpa's estate. If we were going to war, I needed ammunition. I didn't know yet what was in that box, but I knew my family. Where there was smoke, there was usually arson. The lobby of Harrington Enterprises was all glass and intimidation. It smelled of expensive leather and fear. I arrived at 7:45 a.m. I wore my best suit, a navy blue tailored blazer and trousers that screamed corporate killer, not unemployed freelancer. Valerie arrived at 7:58 a.m. She looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy, and she was wearing a dress that was slightly too short for a disciplinary hearing. Mom and Dad were with her, flanking her like bodyguards. "What are you doing here?" Mom hissed at me when she saw me sitting in the waiting area. "You should have stayed home." "We're here to explain that it was a misunderstanding." "He invited me, Mom," I said calmly, not looking up from my tablet. "You're just here to gloat," Valerie sniffled. "You're loving this." Before I could answer, the executive assistant opened the double oak doors. "Mr. Harrington will see you now. All of you." We filed into the office. It was expansive, with a view of the city skyline that cost more than my parents' house. Richard Harrington sat behind a desk that looked like it was carved from the hull of a ship. He didn't stand up. "Sit," he commanded. Valerie took the center chair. Mom and Dad squeezed in on either side of her. I took the chair against the wall, distancing myself. "Mr. Harrington," Dad started, using his reasonable man voice. "I think Saturday was just a case of too much champagne and high emotions. Valerie has been a loyal employee for 3 years." Richard held up a hand. Silence. He picked up a file from his desk. Valerie Vance. Executive Assistant. Salary, $65,000. He looked at her. "You told your family you were the VP of Operations, didn't you?" Valerie shrank in her seat. I said I worked closely with operations. "You fetch coffee and manage the calendar," Richard said bluntly. "But that's not why we're here. We're here because of your expense reports." He slid a stack of papers across the desk. "For 8 months, you've been expensing personal Uber rides, dinners, and, this is my favorite, a client gift that turned out to be a designer handbag found in your possession. Total theft, $12,400. Mom gasped. "That's a lie." Valerie wouldn't. "I have the receipts, Mrs. Vance. And the security footage of her using the company card," Richard said, his voice ice cold. "This is termination for cause. We will also be seeking restitution. If the money isn't returned within 30 days, we file criminal charges." Valerie burst into tears. Ugly, heaving sobs. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. Then, Richard turned his chair toward me. The room went quiet, save for Valerie's sniffling. "Now, Ms. Camilla Vance." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face neutral. "Mr. Harrington. 12 weeks ago, my subsidiary in Hartford was on the brink of collapse. I hired an external crisis consultant through a blind trust to give me an objective assessment," Richard said. He picked up a thick, bound document. The consultant went by the initials CV. He tapped the document. "This analysis is brilliant. It's ruthless, efficient, and it saved me $4 million in the last month alone." He looked at me, his eyes softening just a fraction. "I did some digging after the wedding. I recognized the name. You're CV, aren't you?" I nodded slowly. "I am." Mom and Dad looked at me, confusion written all over their faces. "What is he talking about?" Mom asked. "Camila doesn't have a job. Your daughter," Richard said to them, his voice filled with disdain, "is one of the most sought-after restructuring consultants on the East Coast. And judging by her invoice, she makes more in a month than Valerie makes in 2 years." The silence in the room was deafening. It was heavier than the shame I had felt at the wedding. It was the silence of a paradigm shifting. The narrative they had built for 30 years, that I was the loser and Valerie was the star, had just been nuked from orbit. "I asked you here, Camila," Richard continued, ignoring my parents now, "because I want to offer you a permanent contract. Lead consultant. Direct report to me." I would be honored," I stammered, genuinely shocked. "Good. But," Richard leaned forward, his expression darkening again, "there is one condition. You need to clean up your house." He pointed a finger at Valerie and my parents. "Background checks for this level of clearance are thorough. When I looked into your family's finances to verify your background, I found some irregularities. Not with you, but involving you." He slid a single piece of paper toward me. It was a copy of a bank transfer record from 15 years ago. "I suggest you look into the trust fund your grandfather left," Richard said softly. "The one that was supposed to pay for your college." "That fund was empty," Dad said quickly, his voice cracking. "The market crashed. We lost it all." Richard didn't look at Dad. He looked at me. "The market didn't lose it, Camila. It was withdrawn. In cash. 2 days after your 18th birthday. With a signature that looks remarkably like a clumsy forgery of yours. I stared at the paper. The date. The amount, $150,000. I felt a ringing in my ears. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mother. She was gripping her purse so hard her hands were shaking. Get out, I whispered. Camila, listen, Dad started. Get out. I screamed. It was the first time I had raised my voice in 20 years. All of you. Get out. Richard pressed a button on his desk. Security to my office. Escort the Vance family out. Except Camila. As security dragged a sobbing Valerie and my protesting parents out of the office, I sat there trembling. The professional mask was gone. I was just a daughter realizing that she hadn't just been neglected. I had been robbed. I didn't go back to work after the meeting. I drove straight to my parents' house. I knew they were still at Valerie's, probably strategizing on how to spin this, how to make me the villain again. That gave me a window of time. I still had a key. I let myself in. The house smelled the same as it always did, lemon pledge and secrets. I went straight to the attic. It was stiflingly hot, filled with dust motes dancing in the beams of light cutting through the small window. I pushed past the boxes of Valerie's old trophies, rows and rows of participation awards and dance recitals. My stuff was shoved in the corner, in cardboard boxes that were sagging with dampness. I found the metal lockbox labeled Grandpa's estate. Grandpa Arthur had been the only one who really saw me. He used to sit me on his knee and tell me, Camila, you have a head for numbers. Don't let them make you think you're small. When he died, he left everything to Dad, except for the education funds for me and Valerie. I dragged the box downstairs to the kitchen table, the same table where I had written the $3,000 check for the photographer. I broke the lock with a screwdriver. Inside, there were old savings bonds, tax returns, and a ledger. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. I was looking for the confirmation of what Richard had shown me. And there it was. Grandpa had left $150,000 for each of us. Specifically designated for education, or the purchase of a first home. I traced the line item dated June 14, 2008. 2 days after I turned 18. Withdrawal, $150,000. Beneficiary, Camila Vance. Authorized by, Thomas Vance, custodian. But underneath was a document I had never seen. A waiver of educational use. It claimed that I, Camila Vance, was foregoing college to pursue personal endeavors and authorizing the funds to be transferred to the family general asset pool. At the bottom was a signature. Camila Vance. It was a clumsy scrawl. I remembered my signature at 18. It was loopy, full of bubbles. This was sharp, jagged. It looked like Dad's handwriting trying to look like mine. I sat back, the breath knocked out of me. I remembered 2008. I remembered getting accepted to NYU. I remembered running into the kitchen, waving the acceptance letter. And I remembered Mom sitting me down, looking sad, telling me, we just checked the fund, honey. The investments, they're gone. Bad stocks. There's nothing left. I had believed them. I had declined NYU. I went to a community college for 2 years, working double shifts at a diner to pay for tuition. I took out student loans for my final 2 years at state school. I spent 10 years paying off that debt. $40,000 in interest alone. While I was scrubbing tables and eating instant noodles, they had $150,000 of my money sitting in their account. Where did it go? I kept digging. I matched the dates. July 2008. A wire transfer of $45,000 to University of Southern California bursar. That was Valerie's freshman tuition. September 2008, $32,000 for a 2008 Mercedes C-Class. Valerie's first car. December 2009, $20,000 for home renovations. The new kitchen Mom wanted. They had cannibalized my future to fund Valerie's present. I felt a physical sickness rising in my throat. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete invalidation of my existence. They didn't just prefer her, they consumed me to feed her. I took photos of every document. I scanned them with my phone app. Then I packed the originals into my bag. My phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen. The picture was of us from years ago, me smiling awkwardly, her looking away. I swiped to answer. I needed to hear them say it. I pressed record on my other phone. Camila. Her voice was shrill. Where are you? We're at Valerie's. She's hysterical. You need to come here and fix this with Richard. Tell him you made a mistake about the report. I'm at your house, Mom, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow. Dead. What? Why? I found Grandpa's box. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Camila, don't be dramatic, she finally said, her tone shifting from panic to defensiveness. That was years ago. We were a family. We did what we had to do. You forged my signature, I said. You stole $150,000 from me. You let me scrub floors at a diner while you bought Valerie a Mercedes with my money. Valerie needed the start. Mom snapped. She's sensitive, Camila. She couldn't have handled community college. You're tough. You're a survivor. We knew you'd figure it out. And look. You did. You're rich now, apparently. So why does it matter? You're a survivor. The ultimate excuse of the abuser. Because I could take the pain, they felt justified in giving it to me. It matters, I said, because it's a felony. It's fraud. And it's over. Don't you dare threaten us, Dad's voice came over the line. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. And I paid for that roof 10 times over, I replied. I'm leaving now. Don't contact me. I'll be speaking through my lawyer. Lawyer? Dad laughed nervously. You're going to sue your own parents. For money you don't even need. You're colder than I thought. I'm not suing you for the money, Dad, I said, walking out the front door and locking it for the last time. I'm suing you for the time. The 10 years I spent thinking I wasn't good enough. I want it back. And since you can't give me time, you're going to pay for it. I hung up. I sat in my car and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Mark Sterling. My old friend from community college who was now a forensic accountant and attorney. Mark, I said when he picked up. I have a job for you. And this time, it's personal. The next 3 days were a blur of legal strategy and emotional warfare. Mark Sterling was a bulldog. When I showed him the documents, he didn't just get angry, he got quiet. That's when you know Mark is dangerous. This is textbook fiduciary abuse, Mark said, tapping the waiver with my forged signature. Statute of limitations is tricky with fraud, but since you just discovered it, the clock starts now. We have them, Camila. We can freeze their assets by Friday. Do it, I said. But not just the money. I want a full audit. If they did this to me, what else have they done? While Mark worked on the legal side, the family offensive began. They didn't attack directly at first. They tried the love bomb. Flowers arrived at my apartment. Lilies. My least favorite flower. The card read, "We love you." We were just scared. Let's talk. Then came the flying monkeys. Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister, called me, sobbing. Your mother is heartbroken, Camila. She says you're trying to make them homeless. How can you be so cruel? It's just money. It's just money. The mantra of people who have never had their future stolen from them. I ignored them all. I focused on my work with Richard. We were finalizing the contract. It was a distraction, a lifeline. But Valerie wasn't done. On Thursday night, I received an email notification. It was from the HR department of a company I had consulted for 2 years ago, a small firm where I had done some basic bookkeeping optimization. Subject: Notice of inquiry regarding irregular activities. My stomach dropped. I opened the email. They claimed they had received an anonymous tip alleging that I had shared confidential client data with a competitor during my tenure. I knew instantly who it was. Valerie. She was trying to burn my reputation. If I lost my security clearance or my reputation for integrity, the deal with Harrington would collapse. I would lose the one thing I had built for myself, my career. I called Mark. She's escalating. She's desperate, Mark said. She knows the lawsuit is coming. She wants leverage. Did she use her real name? Anonymous, I said. But the phrasing. Irregular data handling protocols. That's Valerie. She uses buzzwords she doesn't understand. I'll trace the IP, Mark said. But Camila, you need to be careful. A cornered animal bites. That night, my doorbell rang. It was 11 p.m. I looked through the peephole. It was Valerie. She looked disheveled. She was holding a bottle of wine. Camila, please, she said through the door. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. No parents. Just sisters. I hesitated. Part of me, the part that had braided her hair and helped her with homework, wanted to open the door. Wanted to believe there was a sister there. But then I remembered the smirk at the wedding. This is the embarrassment. I didn't open the door. I leaned against it. Go home, Val, I said. I can't, she screamed, her mask slipping instantly. Connor left me. He found out about the firing. He says he's not paying the mortgage on the condo if I don't have an income. I'm going to lose everything. You should have thought about that before you stole from Harrington, I said. It was $12,000, Camila. That's nothing to him. You're ruining my life over nothing. You're jealous. You've always been jealous because Mom and Dad love me more. There it was. The truth she held onto like a shield. They don't love you, Val, I said softly. They invest in you. And now that you're a bad investment, you're going to find out exactly how much that love is worth. I hate you, she shrieked, kicking the door. I'm going to tell everyone you're a thief. I'll make up lies. I'll tell them you hit me. I recorded it all. The threats. The confession of desperation. I'm calling the police, Val, I said. Leave. I heard her sobbing as she walked down the hallway. It wasn't the cry of a heartbroken woman. It was the tantrum of a child who had finally been told no. I slid down to the floor and sat there in the dark. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. But for the first time, I wasn't carrying their weight. I was letting them carry it. And they were crumbling under the load I had borne for decades. Friday morning brought a storm. Mark called me at 6 a.m. We have a problem, he said. The anonymous tip sent to your old client. It wasn't sent from Valerie's phone. It was sent from your parents' home Wi-Fi. But here's the kicker, it was spoofed to look like it came from your laptop's MAC address. I sat up in bed, cold dread washing over me. How? I haven't been there with my laptop in weeks. Someone logged into your old router settings. Did you ever set up their network? Yes, I whispered. Years ago. They used your admin credentials to mask the traffic. They're trying to frame you for corporate espionage, Camila. If this sticks, you won't just lose the Harrington contract. You could face federal charges. Valerie. It had to be Valerie. She wasn't smart enough to do this alone, but her husband, Connor, worked in IT. Or did work in IT before he supposedly left her. What do we do? I asked. We need the device, Mark said. We need the physical router or the computer they used to send the email. Without it, it's he said she said. I couldn't just walk in and take it. They would have changed the locks. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Family dinner. Tonight. 7 p.m. We need to settle this. No lawyers. Just us. Please, Camila. For the sake of the family name. If you come, we can discuss the repayment of the education fund. It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. They wanted me there to manipulate me, or maybe to record me saying something they could twist. Mark, I said. I'm going to dinner. Bad idea, Mark warned. They are hostile. I know. But I need to get into the house. While I'm at dinner, can you get a warrant? Not that fast. But Mark paused. I can get a private investigator to monitor the network traffic from the outside. If they try to access your accounts again while you are physically there, we can prove it wasn't you. Okay. I'm going in. I spent the day preparing. I put a small voice recorder in my jacket pocket. I made sure my phone was fully charged and streaming my location to Mark. I arrived at the house at 7 p.m. sharp. The Mercedes was in the driveway, Valerie's car. But there was another car too. A beat-up sedan I recognized. It belonged to Aunt Margaret. Dad's older sister. The black sheep of the family before I took that title. She had been estranged from Dad for years because she called him a narcissist to his face at Thanksgiving in 2010. Why was she here? I walked in. The atmosphere was stifling. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables. Dad was pouring whiskey. Valerie was sitting at the table, looking pale but composed. Aunt Margaret sat in the corner, knitting, her sharp eyes watching everything. Hello, Camila, Dad said, not offering a hug. Sit down. Hello, Aunt Margaret, I said, ignoring Dad. Margaret looked up and winked. A tiny, almost imperceptible wink. Hello, love. You look expensive. I like it. We sat for dinner. The roast beef was dry. The silence was drier. So Dad started, putting down his fork. We've been talking. We think we have a solution that works for everyone. Oh? I asked, cutting a piece of meat. Does it involve a check for $150,000 plus interest? Camila, be reasonable, Mom said. We don't have that kind of liquid cash. But Valerie has a proposition. Valerie cleared her throat. She pushed a folder across the table. I'm willing to drop the anonymous information regarding your data breach, Valerie said, her voice shaking slightly. And Dad is willing to acknowledge the debt. In exchange, you will go to Richard Harrington on Monday. You will tell him that you misunderstood the expense reports. That I had verbal approval for those expenses. You get me my job back. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. You want me to lie to the CEO of a billion-dollar company? To commit perjury? To save your $65,000 a year job? It's not just a job. Valerie snapped. It's my reputation. And what about my reputation? I asked, slamming my hand on the table. You tried to frame me for espionage, Val. Do you know that's a federal crime? We know you sent the email, Valerie, I lied, bluffing. We have the logs. Connor already talked. Valerie's eyes widened. She looked at Dad. Panic. Connor didn't talk, Dad said, but he sounded unsure. He's not even, stop it. Aunt Margaret's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, dropping her knitting. She reached into her massive tote bag. I've sat here for 30 years watching you people eat this girl alive, Margaret said, pointing a knitting needle at Dad. I stayed quiet because I promised Arthur I wouldn't cause a rift. But Arthur is dead. And you. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. You are all he talked about. She pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. And a stack of yellowed papers. This, Margaret said, slamming the book on the table, is Arthur's diary. And this is the original copy of the will. The one you thought you burned, Thomas. Dad turned the color of ash. Margaret, where did you get that? He gave it to me, she spat. Because he knew. He knew you were greedy, Thomas. He knew you resented Camilla because she was smarter than you. He wrote it all down. Margaret opened the diary. July 12, 2008. Thomas asked me to sign over Camilla's fund to him. He said she was too unstable to handle money. I told him no. I fear for what he will do when I am gone. The room was silent. You didn't just steal my money, I whispered, looking at my father. You stole his trust in me. You told him I was unstable. You were. Mom shouted, desperate. You were always so intense. So serious. We wanted to protect you. Bullshit, Margaret said. You wanted the money for the lake house. The one you bought in 2010 and sold at a loss. I stood up. I have everything I need. Sit down, Camilla. Dad roared, standing up to block my path. He looked menacing. You walk out that door with those lies, and you are no daughter of mine. I haven't been your daughter for a long time, Dad, I said, looking him in the eye. I've just been your employee. And I quit. I turned to Margaret. Are you coming? Margaret grabbed her bag. Try and stop me. As we walked out, Valerie screamed. It was a primal, terrified sound. What about me? Daddy, what about me? I'm going to jail. I didn't turn back. Margaret and I drove to a 24-hour diner. We ordered coffee and pie. For the first hour, we just looked at the documents. The diary was damning. It detailed years of my father's resentment. Apparently, Grandpa Arthur had wanted to leave the family business to me, not Dad. Dad had talked him out of it, claiming I had no interest. He was jealous of a 12-year-old, Margaret said, shaking her head. You were a math prodigy, Camilla. Thomas can barely balance a checkbook. But the emotional vindication wasn't enough. We needed the legal nail in the coffin. Mark met us at the diner at 2 a.m. He looked tired but excited. The bluff worked, Mark said, sliding into the booth. When you mentioned Connor, Valerie panicked. She texted him immediately. We intercepted the text via the cloud backup on the family plan, which, ironically, you still pay for, Camilla. I looked at the printout of the text. Valerie, she knows about the router spoof. Did you tell her? You promised you wiped the logs. Connor, I didn't say anything. Leave me out of this. I'm talking to the FBI if they come for me. This proves intent, Mark said. But we found something else. The reason Valerie is so desperate for money. He opened his laptop. We ran a deep dive on Valerie's financials. We found a secondary account linked to her maiden name. It's hemorrhaging money to an offshore site. Gambling? I asked. Worse. Crypto scams and online casinos. She's down $85,000 in the last year. That's why she embezzled from Harrington. She was trying to cover her losses before Connor found out. But he found out anyway. That's why he left. The puzzle was complete. Valerie wasn't just a spoiled brat, she was an addict. And my parents were her enablers, feeding her my money, their money, and eventually, stolen money, just to keep up the appearance of the perfect family. So I said, sipping my cold coffee. We have proof of the inheritance theft, thanks to Margaret, proof of the attempted frame-up thanks to the text, and proof of the embezzlement. We have a royal flush, Mark agreed. What do you want to do? I looked at Aunt Margaret. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her hand was rough, warm, and real. Burn it down, honey, she said. I want everything, I told Mark. I want the inheritance back with interest. I want the house. I want Valerie to face the consequences of the embezzlement. No deals. No settlements. The house. Mark asked. Your parents' house. It was bought with Grandpa's money, I said. Technically, half of it is mine. And the other half, that covers the pain and suffering. This is going to destroy them, Mark noted professionally. They destroyed themselves, I said. I'm just the demolition crew. Monday morning. The day of the meeting, Valerie thought she had manipulated Richard Harrington's office again. But this time, the dynamic was different. I sat next to Richard. Mark sat next to me. Valerie and my parents walked in. They looked like they hadn't slept in 3 days. Dad saw Mark and stiffened. I thought we said no lawyers, Dad grumbled. You said a lot of things, Thomas, Richard said, his voice smooth. Please, sit. Valerie looked at me, her eyes pleading. She thought I was going to do it. She thought I was going to lie for her. Because that's what Camilla always did. Camilla fixed things. Mr. Harrington, Valerie began, her voice trembling. Camilla and I had a long talk. And she realized that there was a miscommunication regarding the expenses. I had verbal authorization from the previous VP for those client gifts. Richard looked at me. Is that true, Camilla? The room held its breath. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I looked at Valerie. She looked small. Pathetic. But then I saw the malicious glint in her eyes, the same one from the wedding. She wasn't sorry. She was just waiting to win again. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a resignation. I pulled out a USB drive. No, Richard, I said clearly. That is not true. Valerie gasped. Camilla. The truth is, I continued, sliding the drive to Richard, Valerie Vance has been embezzling funds to cover a gambling addiction that has cost her over $80,000. Furthermore, on Friday night, she and my parents attempted to frame me for corporate espionage using a spoofed IP address to blackmail me into lying to you today. You liar. Mom screamed, jumping up. How could you? Sit down. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Security. 2 guards entered. We have the logs, Mark interjected calmly. And we have the sworn affidavit from Connor, Valerie's estranged husband, confirming she asked him to wipe the router. Valerie slumped in her chair, putting her head in her hands. But that's not all, I said, turning to my parents. Mark? Mark handed Dad a thick envelope. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, Mark said. You are being served with a civil lawsuit for the theft of $150,000 from the Arthur Vance estate, plus compound interest calculated over 15 years, totaling $412,000. We are also filing a motion to place a lien on your primary residence. You're taking the house. Dad whispered. He looked old. Suddenly, incredibly old. It was never your house, I said. You bought the renovations with my college fund. You paid the mortgage with the money you saved by neglecting me. I'm just collecting the rent. Camila, please, Mom wept. We're your parents. No, I said, standing up. You're my debtors. And the bank is closed. Richard looked at the scene with a grim satisfaction. He turned to Valerie. Valerie Vance, you are terminated effective immediately. The police are waiting in the lobby to process you for the embezzlement charges. I suggest you don't make a scene. Valerie didn't move. She just stared at me. I'm your sister. I know, I said, looking down at her. That's the only reason I'm not pressing charges for the blackmail. Consider that my wedding gift. Security hauled Valerie out. My parents followed, stumbling, defeated. Dad stopped at the door and looked back at me. There was no anger left. Just shock. Who are you? He asked. I'm the embarrassment, I said. Remember? The door closed. Richard let out a long breath. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Camila. Just pay my invoices on time, Richard, I said, allowing myself a small, tired smile. Done, he said. Now, about that restructuring plan. Let's get to work, I said. For the first time in my life, the air in the room felt clean. I took a deep breath. It smelled like victory. The silence that followed the departure of my family from Richard's office wasn't empty, it was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm finally breaks. I sat there for a moment, staring at the closed door. My hands weren't shaking anymore. In fact, I felt a strange, cold precision settling in my chest. It was the feeling of a surgeon who had just cut out a tumor. It hurts, there's blood, but the rot is gone. Richard poured 2 glasses of scotch. It was 9:30 in the morning. He slid one across the mahogany desk to me. To integrity, he said, raising his glass. To receipts, I replied, taking a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly, grounding me. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of legal artillery. Mark Sterling didn't just file the lawsuit, he launched a blitzkrieg. We froze their assets. We put a lien on the house. We notified the credit bureaus. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my parents to dictate the terms of my existence. I was the one writing the contract. But the real twist, the one I didn't see coming, wasn't legal. It was social. Valerie, true to her nature, didn't go quietly. Even after being dragged out by security, even with the police pending investigation, she tried to control the narrative. She went to social media. She posted a tearful, filtered video on Instagram, claiming she was the victim of a toxic workplace, and a vengeful sister, who was jealous of her success. She spun a tale about how I had manipulated Richard Harrington to get her fired. It got traction for exactly 6 hours. Then, the internet did what the internet does best. They dug. A former college roommate of Valerie's commented, "Wait, didn't you steal $600 from our rent money freshman year?" Then a former coworker from her previous job, Karma. She took credit for my entire project in 2019. And finally, Richard's PR team released a brief, sterile statement. Ms. Vance was terminated for cause involving verified financial irregularities and gross misconduct. Harrington Enterprises has zero tolerance for theft. The comments section turned on her instantly. I watched it happen from my living room, scrolling through the feed with a detachment that frightened me a little. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was just watching the inevitable result of a life built on lies. Then came the phone call I had been dreading. It wasn't my parents. It was my mother's sister, and Sarah, the one who had called me cruel before. Camila, her voice was hushed. Is it true? About the gambling? About the college fund? It's all true, Aunt Sarah. Mark has the bank records. Oh my God, she whispered. Your mother told us, she told us that money was lost in the crash. She told us she was paying for your apartment secretly because you were struggling. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. I've been paying their bills for a decade, Sarah. They haven't given me a dime since I was 18. I'm so sorry, she said, and I could hear her crying. We didn't know. We just believed them because they're the parents. That was the hardest part to swallow. The realization that my entire extended family had viewed me as a charity case, a failure, because my parents had painted that picture to hide their own theft. They had assassinated my character to cover their crime. On Wednesday, Mark called me with an update on the house. It's worse than we thought, Mark said. I pulled the title history. They didn't just use your college fund to renovate the kitchen. They refinanced the house 3 times in the last 10 years. Refinanced? Why? To give cash to Valerie, Mark said. Every time she maxed out a credit card, or wanted a new car, or needed space to find herself, they pulled equity out of the house. The house is underwater, Camila. They owe more than it's worth. Even if we seize it and sell it, there might not be enough to pay you back the full amount. I sat with that information. The house, the symbol of their status, the place where I was made to feel small, was a hollow shell. They had hollowed it out, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, to feed the black hole of Valerie's ego. Take it anyway, I said. Camila, financially, it's a bad move. You'll be taking on a headache, Mark advised. I don't care about the profit, Mark. I want the eviction. I want them to understand that the Bank of Camila is closed. And I want them out of that house before they drain the last drop of value from it. Understood, Mark said. I'll file the motion for immediate foreclosure based on the fraudulent transfer of assets. We can have them out in 30 days. 30 days? I finally responded to one of my father's emails. He had sent 6. They ranged from angry to pleading. The last one was simply, we have nowhere to go. I typed my reply carefully. You have Valerie. She's the investment you chose. It's time to collect your dividends. I hit send. That night, I drove past the house. The lights were off, except for the TV flickering in the living room. I imagined them in there, sitting in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of their choices. I didn't stop. I kept driving, merging onto the highway, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold. For years, I thought I was driving away from them, running away from the pain. Now, I realized I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. And they were just standing still, sinking into the mud they had created. I turned up the radio. The song was about freedom. For the first time, I actually heard the lyrics. The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. Especially when you have a forensic accountant who treats the law like a contact sport. Valerie's arraignment was 2 weeks later. I didn't have to go, but Aunt Margaret insisted. Witnessing the consequences is part of the healing, Camila, she said. So we went. We sat in the back row of the district court. It smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. When they brought Valerie in, I almost didn't recognize her. The golden child was tarnished. Her hair, usually a perfect blowout, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore no makeup. She looked 10 years older. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, she was wearing a gray sweatsuit. My parents were there sitting in the front row. Mom was weeping openly into a handkerchief. Dad was staring at the floor, his posture defeated. The charges were read: embezzlement, wire fraud, and identity theft. Because Mark had handed the district attorney the evidence of the spoofed IP address and the text messages with Connor, the DA had piled on the charges. They weren't just looking at a slap on the wrist. They were looking at real time. Valerie's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender, because they couldn't afford a private one anymore, tried to argue for bail reduction. Your Honor, Ms. Vance has no prior record. She is a victim of a gambling addiction and needs treatment, not incarceration. The prosecutor stood up. She was a sharp woman in a red blazer. Your Honor, the defendant not only stole from her employer, but attempted to frame her own sister for corporate espionage to cover her tracks. This shows a level of malice and sophistication that makes her a danger to the community. Furthermore, she has no assets to secure bail. The judge looked at Valerie over his glasses. Bail is set at $50,000. Valerie turned to look at Mom and Dad. Pay it, she mouthed. Pay it. Dad shook his head slowly. I saw his lips move. We can't. Valerie's face crumpled. It was the face of a child who realizes the safety net is gone. She looked around the room, her eyes frantic, until they landed on me in the back row. For a second, I saw the old Valerie. The one who would sneer. The one who would demand. But then, reality hit her. She didn't sneer. She just looked empty. She was led away in handcuffs. After the hearing, Mom and Dad walked past us in the hallway. Mom stopped. She looked at Aunt Margaret, then at me. Are you happy? Mom asked, her voice trembling with venom. Your sister is in a cage. Is that what you wanted? I didn't put her there, Mom, I said calmly. She put herself there. And you handed her the keys. We did the best we could. Dad shouted, causing a bailiff to look over. We were just trying to help her. She needed us. And I didn't. I asked. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because the answer was obvious. They didn't think I needed help because I was useful. Valerie needed help because she was their project. We are being evicted on Tuesday, Dad said, shifting gears to pity. We have to be out by 5 p.m. We don't have a truck. We can't afford movers. I looked at Aunt Margaret. She didn't say a word, leaving it to me. There's a U-Haul rental on 5th Street, I said. It's $29.99 a day plus mileage. I'm sure you can manage that if you sell the big TV. Camila, Mom pleaded. Please. Just help us move. We're old. Your father's back. It was the ultimate test. The old Camila would have caved. The old Camila would have rented the truck, hired the movers, and probably packed the boxes herself while they critiqued her taping skills. I looked at my watch. I have a meeting with Richard at 2. I can't help. You won't help, Dad corrected bitterly. I won't help, I agreed. There's a difference. Can't implies inability. Won't implies a boundary. Get used to it. I walked away. My heart was pounding, but not from guilt. It was pounding from the adrenaline of breaking a pattern that had held me hostage for 30 years. Aunt Margaret caught up to me outside. She grabbed my arm and squeezed it. Proud of you, she said. It felt mean, I admitted. It wasn't mean, she corrected. It was the first time you treated them like adults instead of toddlers. Adults figure out how to move their own furniture. We got into my car. Where to? Margaret asked. To the bank, I said. I'm setting up a new account. One that nobody shares a last name with. Tuesday came. The day of the eviction. Legally, I didn't need to be there. Mark had hired a sheriff's deputy to oversee the process to ensure the property was vacated and the locks were changed. But I needed to see it. I needed the closure. I parked across the street in my new car, a sensible but luxurious Audi that I had bought for myself, finally spending my own money on my own comfort. The U-Haul truck was in the driveway. It was small. They weren't taking everything. They couldn't. They were moving into a one-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the edge of town, the only place that would take them with their ruined credit and pending lawsuits. I watched Dad struggle with a sofa. He looked frail. For a second a pang of sympathy shot through me. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike. But then I remembered the diary. Camila is unstable. I remembered the smirk at the wedding. The sympathy evaporated. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. They stopped when they saw me. Mom was holding a box of china, the good china she never let us touch. Come to gloat? Dad asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. No, I said. I came to pick up something. There's nothing left for you here, Mom snapped. We threw your junk out years ago. I know, I said. I'm not here for my things. I'm here for the photo albums. The albums? Mom clutched the box tighter. Those are family memories. Memories I paid for, I said. I want the albums from 1990 to 2005. The years before you completely erased me. They're in the attic, Dad grunted. If you want them, go get them. I walked into the house. It was a shell. The walls were stained where pictures had hung for decades. The carpet was worn. Without the furniture to hide it, the house looked tired and neglected. Just like our family. I went up to the attic. It was hot. I found the stack of albums. I sat down on the dusty floor and opened one. There I was. 7 years old. Missing a front tooth. Smiling holding a spelling bee trophy. Dad was in the background, looking at his watch. I turned the page. Valerie's 5th birthday. A massive party. A pony. Dad was beaming, holding her up like a trophy. The contrast was there in black and white. It wasn't just in my head. I took the albums. As I was leaving the attic, I saw something in the trash pile near the door. It was a framed certificate. Camila Vance, National Merit Scholar. The glass was cracked. It had been thrown in the discard pile. Next to it, carefully bubble-wrapped in a box marked Keep, was Valerie's participation sash from a beauty pageant she lost. That was the final nail. They weren't just careless, they were deliberate curators of a false history. I walked downstairs with the albums. I'm taking these, I said. Fine, Mom said, not looking at me. Just go. One more thing, I said. I pulled an envelope out of my purse. What is this? Dad asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Another lawsuit. No, I said. It's a check. Dad's eyes lit up. Hope. It was pathetic how quickly it returned. A check. For $5,000, I said. It's for the movers. And for the first month's rent at your new place. Mom started to cry. Oh, Camila. I knew it. I knew you still loved us. I knew you wouldn't leave us destitute. She reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. I'm not giving it to you because I love you, I said, my voice steady. I'm giving it to you because I am not you. I don't leave family on the street. But this is it. The last penny. If you call me, if you email me, if you send Valerie to my door, I will block the check. I handed it to Dad. He took it, his hands shaking. He looked at the check, then at me. There was shame in his eyes. Deep, burning shame. He knew, in that moment, that he had backed the wrong horse. He knew he had thrown away the child who would have taken care of him for the child who bled him dry. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, I said. Just remember this moment. Remember that the embarrassment was the only one who saved you from being homeless. I turned and walked out of the house. I walked down the driveway, past the U-Haul, past the overgrown lawn. I got into my Audi. I put the albums in the passenger seat. I started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw them standing in the driveway, two small, gray figures against a fading house. They looked like strangers. I turned the corner, and the house disappeared from view. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 18. 6 months later. The ink on the new business cards was still drying. Vance and Harrington, Strategic Crisis Management. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a partner. Richard had recognized that my value wasn't just in crunching numbers, it was in seeing the patterns that led to disaster. And nobody knew disaster patterns better than someone who had lived in one for 30 years. I sat in my new office. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. No more working from a dark living room. No more hiding. My assistant buzzed in. "Camila, the scholarship committee is here. Send them in." This was my passion project. The Arthur Vance Initiative. I had used the money recovered from the sale of my parents' house. After the bank took its share, there was about $60,000 left, plus my own savings to start a fund. It was for students who had been financially cut off by their families. Students who were invisible. We had just awarded our first 10 grants. As I reviewed the applications, my phone buzzed. It was a letter from the Department of Corrections. Valerie. She had pleaded guilty. She was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation. She had also been ordered to pay restitution, which meant her wages would be garnished for the rest of her life. I opened the letter. It was written on lined yellow paper. "Camila, the food here is terrible. Mom says you bought a new car. Must be nice. I'm taking a computer class. They say I have potential. I just wanted to say you win. Okay. You win. Are you happy?" I stared at the letter. No apology. No remorse. Just envy and a transactional view of the world. You win. As if life was a zero-sum game where my success meant her failure. She still didn't get it. I didn't win because she lost. I won because I stopped playing their game. I folded the letter and put it in the shredder. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt indifference. I walked out to the conference room. Richard was there, along with Aunt Margaret, who was now officially on my payroll as Chief Morale Officer. Mostly she just came in, drank coffee, and told everyone they were doing a great job. "Ready for the launch?" Richard asked. "Ready," I said. We were launching a program to help small family businesses avoid bankruptcy. The first client was the bakery in Hartford, the one I had saved pro bono years ago, the one my parents mocked me for. "You know," Richard said, looking at the logo on the screen. "Your father sent me an email yesterday." I paused. "Oh?" He wanted to know if I could give him a reference. He's applying for a job as a greeter at Walmart. My father. The man who was too proud to let his daughter go to NYU. Now asking my business partner for a reference for an entry-level job. "What did you do?" I asked. "I deleted it," Richard said. "I don't know a Thomas Vance. I only know a Camila Vance." I smiled. "Thank you. Camila," Aunt Margaret said, pointing to the window. "Look." The sun was setting over the city, painting the skyscrapers in gold and pink. It was beautiful. "It's a good view," Margaret said. "It is," I agreed. I thought about the girl at table 14, sitting near the kitchen doors, smelling dish soap and shame. I thought about the girl who wrote checks she couldn't afford to buy love she would never get. She was gone. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. I turned to the camera, to you, the audience who has walked this road with me. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about receipts, not just the paper kind but the emotional ones. We keep the receipts of how people treat us. And one day, we have to cash them in. If you are holding on to receipts, if you are the one doing the work, making the sacrifices, and being treated like the invisible option, listen to me. Stop. You are not a bank. You are not a doormat. You are the prize. Don't wait for them to see your value. They never will. You have to see it first. And once you do, walk away. Don't look back. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please type the letter A in the comments. A stands for aware. Aware of your worth. Aware of your power. Let me see a stream of A's down there. I'm Camila Vance. And I'm finally debt-free.